making motion in Indian social media. All other English channels of India are useless. We have such big audience. They should go global and offer an alternative to these leftist media houses. Oh man. Asmon the Savior. Support and subscribe Asmongold. Thank you, Asmongold. 1.7 million, 1.1 million. Asmon speaking out against rising racism towards India. Oh, this is another 1.3 million, 800,000. So this is the same YouTube channel right here. I've been watching Asmon for 5 years. Every day, this guy gains more respect in my books. That's why you're one of the Western streamers worth watching. I love Asmongold. He is an amazing guy, and he tries to be fair to everyone. Do you know what I've really noticed a lot recently? Outside of America, everybody loves me. China loves me. Japan loves me. India loves me. Pakistan probably doesn't like me so much right now. It's so funny to me that I'm probably one of the most pro-US streamers, and I'm loved by most people outside of the US, and the people inside of the US don't like me.
On that note,
This is it. And then, oh, people said this video didn't go very well for Hassan. Is that? Ooh. Hassan is getting cooked in his own video. What is this? It's not the Indian defense minister who's going on CNN talking about social media evidence. Their defense minister...
The right heroes could make all the difference.
Tragedy happened. There has been a death. Recently, a new gaming publication, an old gaming publication, I think, has died.
I will bring peace to this universe.
You know, we've been following the decline of games media on this channel for over a year now, and it's because I find it absolutely fascinating. Because from my perspective, these guys have all the tools at their disposal to be as successful as possible. Far more successful than I could ever be, but they don't wield it with any real conviction. In most cases, it's wielded with ego.
Perfection is unattainable.
Yeah, they're just
They have the
That should not
access, they
stop
have
us.
the
No, the
experience.
thing is that whenever you have a person that has access to tools,
They'll be coming in 30
and
seconds.
then they don't use,
Stay
like
strong.
if you watch a monkey, you ever seen a monkey try to hammer, use a hammer and nails? It can't figure it out, but you know why? Because it's a fucking monkey. It's
Flattery will get
yeah, that's it.
They have the pipelines, the platform. They used to have the audience, but they don't have that anymore. The reader, the gamer, the
Battle
people that
starts
they
in
need
5,
to be able to have a
4,
job in the first
3,
place, they became
2,
insignificant to
1.
them. Or an enemy in some cases. And when you turn your back on the people that keep you employed, well, you find yourself unemployed.
What a surprise.
Odd how that works.
Wow.
Polygon is the latest to fall, and I think they're because in a lot of cases they represent the kind of the journalists that hate the news.
When Kotaku dies, gamers will have
Royal Katniss.
the moment that Kotaku shuts down, that will be the total gamer.
Just the ones that they disagree with. Just so happens to be the vast majority of them.
Some assistance.
Celebration.
But you know, talented writers
Feel better already.
Maybe that day I'll be going through the job application process and working for
they know that you can still communicate, find ways to communicate with the audience. So Polygon is the best example of what happens.
Your time has
Turn your back on
passed.
them entirely, or you take up arms against them. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about all of Polygon. I want to talk about the continued death throes of legacy media. But I still think written media has value.
Written media has more value than any other kind of media in terms of transmitting information. The problem of why written media is dying, there's two problems. Number one, written media has been co-opted by people with biases, and those biases are so overt,
We
and
are
so
undefeatable!
that it just basically alienates anybody reading it because they realize that they're reading bullshit. So that's number one. And number two, people are becoming less verbal and less proficient in reading. This is real power! And you put those two together, and you don't have a lot of people reading.
Diversity of opinions and platforms is necessary. But that would require for games media to be relatable and to start delivering value. And I don't think it's Polygon has been sold off to Valmed. Most of its staff has been laid off. Only 18 senior staff remain. Made their Doom 2016 gameplay video live on as a testament their contributions to this industry. While it may come as a shock to some, it shouldn't, especially given how severe the layoff has been across gaming media. Anyone who's paying attention should have seen this coming. The entire writing staff announced their exits on Blue Sky, which tells you everything that you need to know. And in the eyes of many gamers, this wasn't a tragedy.
It's because Blue Sky actually isn't popular, and them leaving Twitter to go to Blue Sky is them shooting themselves in the foot. Nobody's going to go over and follow you on Blue Sky and read you on
He
Blue
stopped
Sky.
him in their tracks.
All you want is a safe space for other people that agree with you, but there's no organic viewership or growth there at all.
Flawless.
long overdue correction. I'm just gonna say,
for many non-Americans, Blue Sky is the mental health center for people who can't cope with Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
Nobody reads gaming articles like they used to. I've documented this decline before, but it's worth reiterating just how far these platforms have fallen. Legacy sites like IGN, Kotaku, PC Gamer, GameSpot.
Oh, jeez, he's using the graph. Why do you have to do this to him?
Shall I be struck by a smite? No, but you might.
Fire mode!
By the eyes!
All of them started their descent around 2014, and this line out now never bounced back from. In the eyes of the players, these sites have stopped being informative. They've stopped being relatable. They started pushing away from
2018 is when Gamergate happened, by the way.
cosmic
Gamergate
might
is what
returns.
started all of this and killed them. They just didn't realize it until years later.
Back to my
parody PR talking points and outright alienating the very people who once supported them. Most articles now feel like sanitized marketing or worse, ideological messaging to take headlines. And year after year, we've watched these insights consolidated, laid off, or pivoted to something completely irrelevant in a desperate attempt to stay relevant.
Well, they just can't make any money because people aren't going to the website. And this is, so the real problem, and this is like a really good example of this, is that, so do you remember this girl, so she got fired ironically, she made a tweet talking about like me, because I was discussing live streaming, like why I thought it was important for a new content creator live stream, and she started talking about like right-wing extremism, and it's like when all you are is a hammer, every problem looks like an increase. And the issue is that these people are so one-note and one-dimensional that they don't have any real intelligence to be able to evaluate things in a way that makes sense. So the problem isn't even entirely the ideology. It's that the ideology is being used by people that can't really communicate very well, don't understand ideas, and can't conceptualize anything beyond their one-dimensional understanding of the world. That's the issue, and that's the real reason why these people are losing their jobs. It's because they can't write articles that are good and interesting because they're dumb. That's the problem. It's literally that simple.
No other outlet better represents that downfall than Polygon. When Polygon launched in 2012,
Pick
it
your
was ambitious.
hero.
They wanted to be
Or
more than
villain.
just a
I'm not
review site. They
judging.
wanted to set a standard, uncensored opinions, long-form journalism, video documentaries,
I will
cultural
bring
think
peace
pieces,
to
and
this
for a while,
universe,
it
no matter
worked.
the
Their
cost.
earlier reviews were sharp, polished, and well-written. They gave you far more than you asked for, but you read it anyway because it was damn good content. In a lot of ways, some of their earlier
It's
writing
good writing. Like, that's the reason why. Is that most writers nowadays, people don't realize that writing is a form of leisure for a lot of people, and reading is a form of leisure. And so many people who are writers don't understand how to write
I
with
will
any
leave
degree
this
of brevity
universe a better.
or
I will bring
wit
peace to this
or,
universe, no matter the
like,
cost.
anything other than transmitting
30
information
seconds before you
in
attack.
a very
Get ready.
boring way. And the ones that do it in a self-indulgent way, where like they're trying to make these like metaphorical references to something that they learned about in AP English in 12th grade, and it's like, haha, this is so clever because we're a theater kid. They're just not
All
good
eyes over
writers
here.
at the end of the day.
everything reflects what we see in
battle
video
starts in
games
5,
commentary today.
4,
Introspective takes on
3,
how playing a
2,
game makes you feel, what it
1.
reminds you of, what you wish
All you
other
need to do
studios
is
could
capture the
learn
mission
from.
area.
We had a
Got
solid
it?
pulse on what concerned players the most, but then there was a cultural shift, and Polygon just didn't shift with it. Instead, they veered off
They
a cliff.
shifted
The
against
turning
it.
point came with Gamergate 2014, a controversial flashpoint in the industry that changed the tone of games media across the board.
What changed the tone of games? I think almost all the problems with video games now, in terms of like any of these social messaging issues, can be tied back to
Mission area
games.
is yours to
I think
capture
that
now.
it is unironically the original sin.
Outlets were a little bit more cautious. Polygon did it all. And leaning into this activist adjacent, socially progressive lens, they began to frame every game for identity politics. This girl got exposed for having a sexual relationship with a and then it was kind of like a watershed moment where as soon as this thing came out, there were a lot of other instances of journalistic behaviors that
Now
were
I see them.
unethical, right? Like, and also, like, by the way, it's okay to write a review of something game, but you have to disclose that you're in a relationship with a person, right? I mean, we can do and so that's really what it is. And so unethical quid pro quos. Yeah, exactly. Like, so like a great example of this is that like somebody sent him a video game for review, and they sent him an Xbox to review the game, to play the game.
I am ready to put on a show.
The Xbox after you get done reviewing the game. Well, if you do that, you're obviously giving somebody consideration, and when you give somebody consideration, there's a reason for that. It's because you want something back. And I think that type of quid pro quo, you know, like it exists with that, which is like black, basically. It's like saying, like, we're going to do one thing for you, and then you're going to give us this. That's what that term is. And so, that prevalence caused gamers to feel like all of the media and the things that they were receiving were completely inauthentic and wrong. And that criticism was shifted
Mutants
to being
always
that, like,
rise
well,
again.
because it's with a woman, that you're not mad about this thing, you're mad because it was a woman. And so it got
You'll have to
shifted
keep
from
fighting
being
until we have a
a
winner.
concern. And by the way, I'm sure there was a degree of like negativity when like there always is. But it was maligned. See kind of what I'm saying about how this happened? Yeah, it was framed in a way that made it like misogynist, that gamers are bad, etc. And that's what I think radicalized a lot of gamers against games media. And that's why so many gamers have been
Mutants
celebrating the
always
failures
rise
of games
again.
media, is because games media participated in this unethical behavior and also this complete mischaracterization of people that play their games in general.
The reviews weren't about what the game did
That's
well, they
what
were
it
about
was.
what it failed to represent. And I think their review of
Yeah.
Bayonetta 2 is probably the best example of this. A mechanically brilliant action game, well loved and reviewed across the board. And they knocked it down to a 7.5 out of 10 because the reviewer didn't like how sexy the main character was. Not because
It left me
do
asking how
what
many
it
different
takes to
ways
protect
Platinum could
mine.
find to run a camera between
No
Bayonetta and
matter
Spike.
the price.
What's funny to me about this is that you think that's a problem. That's why people play the game.
30 seconds before you attack.
the gameplay,
Get
not
ready.
because of the performance, because of problematic
It's
sexualizing.
sexist, gross pandering. It's
Always a
totally
pleasure to
unnecessary.
see you out
I
here
disagree.
getting
I
your
like
hands
it.
dirty,
And I think this is the problem, is that back then a lot of gamers tried to
Turn 'em to
make it out like,
diamond,
oh, it's art
They'll
or
make it
it's
through
whatever.
without breaking.
And I think what's
it's
really
not
kind
quite
of
that
caused a lot of
I
these people to
suppose.
lose relevance is just the accepting of, yeah, I
The
know it's
battle starts
completely
in 5,
sexist and it's
4,
total gooner
3,
content, and that's what we
2,
want. Give it to us
1.
right now.
All you need to do is
And I
capture
think
the
that
mission
I think
area.
really
Got
what
it?
proves that to be true is
I
gotcha
thought the
games.
Hellfire Club's dungeons
Every
were
gotcha
cool.
game, look at any subreddit, and it's all fan art of the female characters making out with each other. That's just how it is.
Invisible?
Telling people what to do. Yeah, exactly. We're now okay with saying it. Yeah, but there's right? We're gonna agree with Bayonetta. I know there's But what my point is that
Looks
I
like
think
the
a lot
mission
of
area
men
is
felt
yours to
insecure
capture
about
now.
it. And I think now that it's more socially acceptable to do that, guys are more than willing to say, like, yeah, that's exactly what we want to do.
I am ready to put on a show.
And I think that's one of the other big reasons why now I think these people are using the narrative.
This is the kind of scoring that infuriates them. Polygon wasn't just judging the game, they were judging the player. While not saying it overtly, they were saying that this is the kind of content that shouldn't exist, and you shouldn't be okay with liking it. Then came their review of Kingdom Come Deliverance, where they called the game woefully bland and claimed that women in the game seem to only have 3 functions. They either perform as two-dimensional sex objects, that's water from a river, or do needlepoint. Ignore it.
You shall not be harmed.
I've got bad news about the 1400 in here. They're not gonna like it.
The setting, 15th century Bohemia, one of the most
Time!
in the game, ignoring the historical context entirely because it didn't fit the narrative that they wanted to fit. A game that prided itself on historical accuracy needed to bend itself to popular media trends and revisions instead of just letting it exist
Keep going.
as a contrast to how far we've come as a people and as a civilization. I don't think these outlets or these writers understand the kind of damage that this approach does. Not only does it do damage to their own credibility, but it does it to the games themselves. Contrast matters. Games that are exploring historical themes or history itself should be able to present
Well, it looks like bullshit. Like when I'm playing a historical game and then they have a bunch of female like warriors, I'm like, okay, this is one of those bullshit weird games. Because everybody knows that didn't happen. Like, and then also like, oh, but there's like Joan of Arc. There are like 3 other examples. Exactly. Yeah, anytime I see that kind of stuff, I immediately am like, oh, it's one of these games.
that world as it was, not as they wish it would have been. Rather than allow creative talent to stand on its own, the media often demands ideological support.
I am ready to
Featuring
put on a
everything
show.
is modern social commentary. And in the game, this is why they feel their platforms like weapons, shaming groups, poisoning discourse, and trying to turn audiences against them.
He's completely right. He is really right about this.
I do
Is that they weaponize the platform. And the thing is that, and this is the reason why I do the same thing. Because like these people are never going to stop doing this. So the only way to fight back against this is to do it back to them. And by the way, there's a lot more of us than there are of them. As you can see by the fact that my channel is doing really well and they're laying people off. Keep going. Oh, I will.
I am not the
I will.
man
I
I
will keep
used
going
to
until
be.
it's done.
I have found
Final
a
Fantasy
greater
16 went through the exact
cause.
same thing. Square Enix wanted to tell a grounded Northern European-inspired fantasy story. But when the director
There's
explained,
no black people in the story. I forgot all about this. Oh my god.
30 seconds before you attack. Get
that
ready.
excessive diversity would conflict with the game's lore
Yeah.
and tone, he was met with headlines
saw
like
your
Final
most
Fantasy
recent
16 dev
invoice
has a
for
terrible
supplies,
answer for why the
Logan.
game is so
I
white,
have
or Final Fantasy 16 has no business abiding by historical realism.
I need the right gear to do the job. Actually, you're wrong.
You do not
Nope.
need yet another
Nope.
motorcycle
This wasn't
to
coverage,
crash.
it was a correction. A demand that
Yeah, this is not
Battle starts in
journalism. This is
5,
activism.
4, 3.
even fiction needs to
2,
submit to
1.
ideological vetting. I think that these
All you need to
developers
do is
should have
capture
the
the
freedom to
mission
create
area.
without
Got
being
it?
publicly shamed for not fulfilling someone
do
else's
this the
social
same way we
agenda. Not
always
every
do.
game has to
Together.
represent everyone, and not every creative decision is a political statement. And
Right.
to be fair,
And these people have
we
no
have
problem saying that when a game like South of Midnight comes out. They have no problem saying, like, well, this game was made for you. Okay, fine. But what about when a game's not made for you?
I can already hear the counter-argument. Players are mounting pressure campaigns to be pushing back against what they view as forced representation or initiatives that they don't agree with, but there is a difference between market feedback and institutional pressure. One affects sales, the other shapes perception. Media controls how these games are framed and who sees them. When they start
Yeah, exactly. Like they try to
You are under my protection.
games and they create a chilling effect inside of game development where if games write stories and tell lies about video games in order to make them look bad. And that's why now, for video games that do play into these narratives and they do actually listen to these journalists, it's like, you know, like the siren song of Elysium, right? It's like, you know, if you want to sail your ship onto the rocks, that's fine. And guess what we are? We're the rocks. We'll destroy the ship.
Deserves your attention.
And it's worked. And that's why so many of these video games have died.
Unsuspecting foe.
It's because there's been so much pushback from it. And now these companies are afraid to do it.
Like myself again.
Get wrecked? Yeah, get Yeah, exactly. If enough people are negative about a game, you can absolutely kill the game. Don't ever believe that you can't do it. You can.
ideology over insight stops being criticism and starts becoming coercion. But the media never seems to be able to grasp that this outrage cuts both ways when they pressure studios to go against ideology and series of backlash. Not just against that game, but the very idea that these games need to carry a message that Shadows, South Midnight Concord, that they can draw fire in the vacuum. The media helps build the environment where these players now push back. You kept shaping the discourse. Don't be surprised when discourse shapes you right back. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. I mean, this is the reason why Polygon and many of these other media outlets have lost their relevance over time. It's because in the eyes of players, they've become an oppositional voice.
It's because their way of seeing the world is simply wrong. People don't have a problem with politics in video games. People have a problem with the mentally ill SSRI, upper middle class, white woman, progressive American politics. That's what people don't want to hear. Nobody has a problem with Metal Gear Solid.
You'll have to
People
keep
do have a
fighting
problem
until we
with
have a
politics
winner.
like Kung
Control
Fu.
lost.
That's the big difference.
Disappear!
It is using their platforms to pressure people to make games that
It's not that we don't want politics. We don't want
interesting players for themselves. And that's all been proven with statements made by Daniel Barva, the creator of Kingdom Come Deliverance. After being checked interview, Kingdom Come creator Daniel Barva opened up about the
I am ready to put on a show!
after the first game. He said that it felt like there was
back when the game originally came out, because the game didn't adhere to certain social He was very afraid the journalists would pull what they did with the first game on it. This for like the real story. Like a fine thread on it, and it like it's the idea like you being on edge, you can be cut anytime.
Their team's capture progress has passed the halfway
Yeah,
point.
complaining that the sequel wasn't very diverse and blah 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 to quote him directly. He talks about how he was afraid that they would scour his Facebook, auto-translate his political rants, and write up that he's now a Trumpist and right-winger against this and that. He talks about how that felt like a threat to him and how he was prepared to get fired over it. That is the legacy of Polygon, not just relevant articles, fear, self-censorship, development choices made out of survival, not creativity. You can have
And
your
also, if you want to know one of the really big news, that gamers are actually not right-wing at all, and this is a totally fake narrative that's being created by weird Karen freaks, is the fact that Metaphor was one of the greatest games that came out last year, and I think that very few people debate that. Metaphor covered very progressive social issues, but it did so in a way that wasn't patronizing to the player, and it was respectful, and it was mature. The entire idea that like gamers, like I don't know what they think that they want, right? And so the media called Dan out. Yeah, I don't know. But Metaphor is one of the top 3 games of all time. It's a very good game, right? Luis Guillabern. Well, I think Luis Guillabern is a really great example, right? Is like if he was if
Welcome to Oblivion Remastered, a game that offers so much freedom that it would be an honor to use all that freedom in the most unintended way possible, and create the strongest and the laziest build ever known to the universe. This is Aiming for Gaming, and today we're aiming...
Over the course
Which
of my
year do you think you
28
might be
years of
today?
life, I have played
Be
a
wary.
lot
No
of video
timeline
games.
exists where Magneto
Some of my
yields.
very earliest memories in life involve countless hours playing Mickey's Speedway USA on the Nintendo 64.
Now,
Bet
who am I
you
gonna
didn't see
banish
that
from
one
this
coming.
match?
Now, as a result of having spent so much time playing, digesting, analyzing, and discussing the gaming medium of entertainment, it's actually become increasingly difficult for me to find games that live up to my memories of playing games throughout my youth. And this is because, for lack of a better term, you always remember your first. Like, for all of the flaws that people love to point out in it, Fallout 3 was a life-changing gaming experience for me because I had never played anything like it before. It quite literally changed what I thought video games were even capable of doing. Even if similar games had come before historically, there wasn't a similar game that I had ever encountered up to that point, creating for nothing short of pure magic. Halo 3, Mass Effect 2, Assassin's Creed 2, Dragon Age Origins,
Pick your hero,
Forza
or
Horizon,
villain, I'm
Elden
not
Ring,
judging.
Persona 5. All of these games are video games which fundamentally changed my perspective of and expectations for what a video game could offer in terms of entertainment. Yet, because I've already had these experiences, it becomes much more difficult for a game to make me say, I didn't even know this was possible. Because in a lot of ways, I feel like I've seen it all. Well, to my shock, it turns out I hadn't seen it all. Not even close. Because
Our
I
past was
hadn't
mired
seen
in loss and
Claire
grief,
Obscure,
but the future
Expedition
belongs to
33.
mutant kind.
Because Expedition 33
30 seconds
is
before
so
you
good.
attack. Get ready.
Sorry, I meant to say it is so utterly, earth-shatteringly, expectation-redefining, mind-bogglingly brilliant. I have sincerely had my expectation for what a video game could be entirely gamaged. It has, and I mean this without hyperbole, the most gorgeous, awe-inspiring video game world I've ever seen. It has my favorite turn-based combat system I've ever experienced. It has a story with enough relational depth, mystery, and shocking twists that it could make the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones blush. Now, sure, some of this may be tainted with some recency bias, but these feelings are also incredibly genuine. They aren't tainted with nostalgia, they are shrouded with a comparison to previous experiences. The depth of emotion and entertainment, a pure, dumbstruck awe I feel towards this, is the first I felt these feelings in as long as I can remember. That feeling is that gaming kind of became rules, and that video games can still deliver not just expectation-defying, but expectation-defining experiences. So I wanted to talk about it, because it's all I can think about. And I'm sure there are people out there just like me who want to have this conversation about this impeccable work of fiction. So in this video, we will be doing as in-depth of a critique and analysis of the game Claire Obscure Expedition 33 as I can possibly offer. We'll go over the aesthetics, the gameplay, the story, the characters, all of it. Please remember, these are just my opinions. You're entirely entitled to disagree with me or others. Feel free to use the comment section for that, but as always, try to keep it civil.
One couldn't win without the other.
As we begin our journey into the world of Expedition 33, I think it's important to start with where this triumph of a game even came from. Because there's some incredibly inspiring and important lessons here for both creatives, as well as context for just how high above its weight class this game is actually punching. In 2020, during the peak of the COVID lockdown, Ubisoft employee Guillaume Grosch, I'm pretty sure right now, and I apologize, found himself much like the rest of us, quite bored. As a result, he began work on a game inspired by his favorite childhood series of Japanese role-playing games, Final Fantasy, as well as taking some inspiration from the Persona series. According to Guillaume, Final Fantasy X is a big inspiration for us, specifically on the party, pacing, narrative, and stuff like that. And Persona 5 is a big inspiration for the UI and how dynamic the battles are. You don't get bored playing Persona because it's fast and fun. In order to bring his vision to life, Guillaume decided to put together a team, and he did so in a rather unconventional way. Through internet search, most especially Reddit. One of the people who ended up replying, Jennifer Svedberg-Yen, who would eventually become the lead writer on the project. According to Jennifer, she sent in a voice audition demo, but after originally being cast for one of the major characters, she transitioned into writing for the game instead. Eventually, Guillaume left Ubisoft to start Sandfall Interactive in Montpellier, France, focusing full-time on Expedition 33 after securing funding from Hepker Interactive. Eventually, the team expanded to around 30 members, many of whom were recruited in similar unconventional ways. Perhaps most interestingly, composer Lorien Hestard, who had never worked on a video game before, was discovered on SoundCloud and recruited for a project. Considering that this will undoubtedly go down as one of the all-time great gaming soundtracks, Hestard was one hell of a find off SoundCloud. The game would eventually be named Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Internally, it was referred to simply as Expedition 33, as Sandfall co-founder Francois Louis noted in an interview that the tagline Clair Obscur is present in the title to represent the game's place in a Clair universe, with hopes for future games which bear the Clair Obscur title. The name Clair Obscur refers to a painting technique from Italy which uses strong contrast between light and dark to create depth and emphasis, something which holds a deeper meaning to the story of the game and the lore of its universe. Expedition 33 is set in a dark fantasy world, inspired by the Belle Epoque French era. Translating to the Beautiful Era, the Belle Epoque was a period in French and European history from 1871 to 1914, marked by peace and cultural flourishing before World War I. This era was considered a time of optimism, peace, and prosperity, marked by cultural, scientific, and artistic innovation, especially in Paris, where the arts thrived at the time. This sense of artistry, prosperity, and optimism is central to the aesthetic of Expedition 33 from the moment the player first sets foot in Lumiere, and creates this sharp contrast with the cosmic horror themes and more grotesque imagery which is present throughout the game. An article on Rock Paper Shotgun described the setting as being gorgeous as it is putrid, a place of both sublime monstrosity and folklore whimsy, and frankly, I couldn't have said it any better myself. We'll get into the lore behind the setting during the narrative breakdown, but just as a fictional setting, it's very unique. It has a sense of grounded realism mixed with surrealism that you really only get out of From Software games, with this hint of unapologetic French squad. Although I don't find the world building to be amongst gaming giants such as Elder Scrolls and Mass Effect, it is fundamentally its own. Of course, it's also meant to be something more psychological.
By the eye of Agamotto!
The human psyche expressed in a game world, more so than it is an exploration of itself. And from that perspective, well, it's pretty good. This is Supernova! And I really believe this expression of the mysteriousness of the human soul is what this world is about, creating one of the most beautiful settings in history. And I don't say that lightly. Among some of the best-looking games of all time, you'll find an impressive catalog. Battlefront 2, Elden Ring, Red Dead Redemption 2, Forza, Cyberpunk 2077. All of these games have left their mark on gaming history for their ability to craft beautiful and engaging worlds, assets, and environments. Yet, despite this,
Maximum Pulse!
Single most beautiful game I've ever played, full stop. I have never been an individual who much about how good a video game looks to you on the first 30 minutes or so. I've always cared far more about the consistency of its graphical quality and the style of the game in relationship to the gameplay. Player Obscura is the first game I played, maybe apart from some moments in Elden Ring, where I consistently had to just stop, stare, and let my jaw hit the floor. Every environment seems to top the last in terms of its sheer scale and a continuously impressive amount of variety. The sky and air of these locations are littered with floating stone and other abstract objects which make the world feel alien and supernatural. The scenes of non-linear art design simultaneously appealing to cosmic horror and ethereal optimism, as if one is about to take a peaceful, painless walk into sheer oblivion. The game, in every moment, is a pure work of art. The Flying Waters is a vibrant, otherworldly setting where you'll walk along the ocean floor, surrounded by colorful coral and immersive underwater scenery, like a place existing between reality and a dream. Monoko Station is a winter wonderland which connects the abandoned transit, where elegance is juxtaposed with elements of decay, suggesting a once thriving area left over time. The Forgotten Battlefield is a desolate, war-torn expanse, long abandoned yet eerily suspended in time. Raiders, broken weapons, bodies, and crumbling siege engines dot the landscape, creating a foreboding hopelessness due to the sheer scale of the expedition's trial. The Sacred River intertwines nature with magic. Bioluminescent creatures and bells bring the forested area into the realm of the surreal, evoking a sense of beauty that is both serene yet unsettling. These are only a fraction of the environments players explore over the course of the game, and every single one of them was beyond impressive. It feels like not a single polygon was wasted in the construction of this game. As a gaming world, Expedition Games is the single most impressive I've ever encountered. The most crazy part of it all, though, everything I've shown you is being run on an Xbox Series S. That's right, not even a Series X. This is the downgraded Xbox version of the game. This game is so well optimized that not only is it the most gorgeous gaming world I've ever seen, but they got it to run almost seamlessly on lesser hardware. I don't even know how that's possible, and I'm not a computer whiz, I'm just an average gamer. But the fact that this beautiful game I experienced is the downgraded version is infinitely more impressive to me. But you know what I didn't get a downgraded version of? The gameplay. Player Obscura Expedition 33 uses a combat system known as reactive turn-based, which combines traditional turn-based mechanics with timing and reflex challenges. Skills require precision button timing for bonus effects or extra damage. For defense, players can either dodge or parry enemy attacks. Dodging is easier and avoids damage completely, while parrying has a smaller timing window but can trigger a counter-attack. In multiple interviews with developers, I've seen two games mentioned as inspirations for the reactive combat system. Sekiro, an inspiration for the game's dodging and parrying mechanic, and Lost Odyssey, an Xbox 360-era turn-based JRPG, for its usage of a combat timing mechanic to enhance ability potency. Lost Odyssey is a really deep cut from my childhood, as it was a game that, although I never finished, stuck with me, since it felt so different to me than anything I had otherwise played, and it's nice to see its unique mechanics coming full circle as an inspiration for what is now one of my favorite games I've ever played. As a massive Persona stan, I can say that until Expedition 33, those were by far my favorite turn-based combat systems. But Expedition 33 outdoes those games, bringing my understanding of what turn-based combat can be into a new light. I personally love the way this game incorporated reactive elements. Although offensive skill timing is really simple and I rarely missed, the defensive mechanics add an engaging element of interactivity to what was otherwise downtime in traditional turn-based games. Adding in a level of skill which creates satisfaction, I can only equate to memorizing the patterns of Dark Souls bosses. Speaking of memorizing patterns, that's exactly what one does to perfect the dodging system. I was absolute garbage at first, failing to dodge the vast majority of attacks, but at some point it clicked for me that the pacing of enemy attacks is very similar to a rhythm game, and the visual cues are often accompanied by auditory cues to assist with timing. And by perfecting my craft over hundreds of duels, by the end of the game, I was able to do things such as perform 5 parries and a counterattack on bosses. Having that much interactivity and control over combat
right heroes could make
really
all the
added to the
difference.
fun, enjoyment, and satisfaction I got out of each fight. The other highlight of this game's combat systems is how each character has their own individual systems and styles for combat. We will get into the nitty-gritty of each style a little later in the video, but I just want to note that these styles provide significant depth to combat, as I had to consider how the effects of each style relate to the other characters in my party, thus allowing me to fully utilize each round maximally, such as knowing when to use CL's double damage ability on Lene, so that Lene could increase the damage output of her Mayhem skill, which is directly tied to Lune's stain system. It's an intentional, careful,
We'll be coming in
beautiful
30
dance
seconds.
amongst
Stay
many
strong.
intricate systems to create a combat flow that is both strategic, fast-paced, and
Is there any
incredibly
femboys in this
enjoyable.
team?
And these things
I like that.
specific buffs, strategy shifting abilities, and an equipment and passive system
all
which
support
allows
players are
for
fanboys.
careful
Thoughts?
development of characters, stats, and abilities, and combat overall
Yo, what?
is just as
You do
engaging.
not sound like a
femboy, Lil Bro.
Is
this a femboy?
Detail, and it makes for nothing like my new favorite.
Hey, hi, can I ask you?
Yeah, bro, we're not winning this game, too.
Now that we've gone over the setting and the combat systems, it's time to get into the narrative. In order to do this, we will go over the narrative of each act, focusing on the I'll give some commentary on narrative highlights, as well as thoughts about the act after summarizing their plot. Summaries can be pretty tedious, so I will try to keep it as concise as possible, looking at only the major plot beats. We will get into thoughts on the side content a little later in the video.
My bad. I'll get back on the My bad, not
Prologue
good.
of the game, titled Lumiere, opens with Gustave and Maëlle in the gardens of the French town of Lumiere, as Maëlle encourages Gustave to give a rose to his estranged love, Sophie. Upon meeting up with her in the center of town, he presents her this flower, which she accepts as the two reconcile, placing the flower upon her necklace, which is adorned with other flowers. There is a somber tone, as if the pair believe they will have much time together going forward, and there is talk of grand cycles and changing the world. Gustave agrees to walk Sophie to the harbor at her request. Sophie then becomes the main character, and as the player walks to the harbor, they have the option to talk to several of the people.
Behold the god of thunder!
Conversations are filled with themes of regret, gratitude, and condolences. And there's
I am ready to put on a show!
all of the romance, the beauty of the scenery and music, and the festivus nature of the town. Something bad is about to happen. One conversation in particular, with the drunken Maxine, is far more explicit than the rest, making it clear that many people are about to die. Sophie and Gustave live in the harbor, and after Gustave receives a beautiful with 33 patch on it, a gift from his students and Sophie, the pair watch out across the harbor. A large cliff across the ocean has the number 34 illuminated upon it, and the scene changes to a much darker tone, as a large replaces the 34 with a 33.
Now might
As Sophie
be a good
cries,
time to stop
her and
them.
many others turn into rose petals, an event known as a gamage. This opening is just so damn exceptional. The shredding, somber atmosphere, juxtaposed with the beauty of the environment and the music, juxtaposed for what is to come throughout the game. And the dressing of the individuals is a popular trope that plays on nostalgia from familiar and unfamiliar shopping scenes in film and gaming. It's silent, painless, and dramatic. This opening to the game is haunting, beautiful, and dares you to die in chemistry and figurative.
Behold the god of
We then see
thunder!
Gustave going to the Expedition Festival later in the evening. Through dialogue, we discover that each year these students' interest awakens into a number on the far monolith, causing all people matching that age to suddenly vanish. Along with the Gamage, every year the city of Lumiere sends out an expedition,
have to be
often
center
filled with
stage.
people in the last year of life
Rebirth
before their
is a
Gamage, to
mutant's
sail to the
greatest
continent
gift.
which the
There's still a
Paintress
chance to
inhabits
stop
in an attempt to stop her. The exception to this in Expedition 33 is Mael, who is only a teenager and is fostered into Gustav's care. Thus, we volunteer for Expedition 33 to get away from the
Now might
hopelessness
be a
of
good time
Lumiere
to stop
and
them.
continue being alongside Gustav. Gustav is the captain of Expedition 33, and after an evening of celebration and preparation, they depart for the continent. Once the expedition lands on the continent, they encounter, to their shock, a middle-aged man with white hair and a cane, something which shouldn't be possible considering elderly people have long since demolished in this world. He is approached by one of the expeditioners, and, well,
I was worried.
My power cannot be quelled.
Better stop that vehicle!
this for me was the game's hook.
It's the grand
From this point on, I did not put the game down for multiple days until I had finally beaten it. Between the shocking twist, the sheer violence, the intensity, the mystery, and the Elden Ring style
Behold the god of thunder!
This is one of the most brilliant openings.
By the eye of Agamotto!
Such a heavy shift in tone from the beauty and tragedy of the rest of the prologue. We will lean into the sense that we are about to do something foolish and hopeless with this adventure, but with no other direction to go but forward. This is my favorite cutscene in the entire game, and is nothing short of a genius piece of storytelling. The prologue as a whole is in fact, to use the phrase again, genius. We are introduced to characters not through bogged down exposition, but through action, tragedy, through the real effects of life, and their relationships to one another as the realities of this world unfold. The strongest exposition comes from each strongest, because as the only one looking at the world through the lens of its sickening reality, having the
I am ready to put on a show!
we are left with so many questions about the nature of this world, the fate of the expedition, the psychological impact something as dramatic as Gamage's plays on these people. It's just such a good setup to influence me as the player to chase down the answers to the questions this game was presenting.
Strange is at it again.
The current score is 0.
We then
2,
enter Act
3.
1, titled
Time
Gustav.
to switch
The
things
titular
up,
character
including
awakens
which side
severely
you're on.
wounded in the daylight of a beautiful forest, encountering his first
Open your
Nevrons
eyes.
as he wanders
Reality
aimlessly.
is but an illusion.
For context,
You'll
a
need a
Nevron
top-notch
is
team
the
to
name
win
given
this
to the
one.
monsters of the continent by the expeditioners. Gustav eventually fights his way to a nearby cave where, both on the way into and within the cave, he encounters the aftermath of a massacre of expeditioners, including the body of one of his friends. Driven to despair by the ordeal, Gustav prepares to take matters into his own hand until he is interrupted by Lune, another survivor of the massacre, who encourages Gustav to keep going alongside her. This scene is perhaps the most grounding in the entire game. The reality of the situation would drive any common
30
man
seconds
to
before you
some
attack.
very
Get
dark
ready.
places, and to see Gustav go there, the brave titular character we follow through the prologue, into this place, it really paints the picture of the reality of the situation for the player, once again brilliantly setting the tone of the game early on in its story. The pair of Lune and Gustav then eventually stumble across a message on a tree
battle
painted
starts in
alongside
5,
an Expedition
4,
33 logo,
3,
telling them
2,
that whoever wrote
1.
this message took Mael to the quote, weird world
Get that vehicle
to
to
the
its
north.
destination.
After some heavy-handed negotiation, Gustav convinces Lune to go after Mael with him. This takes them to the Flying Wall, where they come across a peculiar, clearly out of place door. Choosing to explore what's inside, they teleport into a large manor. Inside, they find Mael, where it's revealed that she woke up there after the massacre at the beach and was taken care of by a mysterious, faceless creature who introduces himself to the others. Upon en Invasion Manor, and returning to the Blind Waters, Mael introduces Lune and Gustav to Noko, her Gestrel friends. Gestrels are fairy tale creatures in the city of Lumiere, and look like posable human figures used for sketching with paintbrush tips on their heads. They aren't very bright and are obsessed with fighting. Noko informs them that to get to the Paintress, they'll have to cross another large sea, and that in order to find a solution to this dilemma, they need to talk to Golgra, the chief of the Gestrels who resides in their village, located in the forest with the red trees. The expeditioners thus head to the village and meet with Golgra, fighting a variety of Gestral defenses along the way. Golgra suggests that the expedition request assistance from a being named SPA. However, Golgra agrees to give them the password if they can win the upcoming combat tournament in the Gestral Arena. After conquering all of the Gestral champions, the expedition must fight the ultimate champion, who ends up being Ciel, another one of the expeditioners who survived the Beachfront Massacre. After putting on a show for the Gestrels, Ciel explains she awoke in a yellow forest and made her way to the village, then agrees to once again join the expedition to stop the Paintress. Golgra informs the victorious expeditioners the password is "out of my way," yelled very loudly, which made me unironically laugh. The game generally has a really good sense of humor, and I find it well balanced with the darker tones around the rest of the game, with this being one of the best examples. Back at camp, the expeditioners reconnect with one another when Mael suddenly has a vision. The scene goes black and white, and she ends up seeing a young girl similar in age to her, who is scarred, wearing a mask and has white hair. She is accompanied by the man from the beach, who calls the masked girl Alicia, and tells her that everything is Mael's fault, and that Mael is going to make things worse. When Mael comes back to reality, it's apparent to the rest of the expeditioners that something is very wrong with her. She has a severe anxiety attack trying to describe what she saw. The team agrees to discern the vision after Mael has had time to rest. Mael has several of these visions throughout the game, and although I think they could add more in terms of the narrative, I really appreciate the shifting of color to black and white, as well as shifting the aspect ratio to give it an otherworldly, out-of-body darkness. It highlights that something is clearly
Ready to put on a show!
I also appreciate the breakdown of the stoic teenage personality of a scared child who can't comprehend what's happening to her, as it makes her feel like a real person, a child who is in over her head. The expedition then heads to Escape's nest where Gustav hilariously proves the password of guard, who is upset at Gustav's rudeness, much to Gustav's dismay. Inside the cave, they meet the enigmatic SPA, a powerful being who plays a significant role in children's stories in Lumiere. He tells the expedition he requires rocks in order to traverse, and he has lost these specific rocks. The twin rock, Glory, was lost to his arch nemesis Francois, who, in a hilarious subversion, is not in Negron-infested territory like guessing, but is instead next door. After battling Francois, the expedition retrieves the rock and brings it back to SPA. But it turns out that rock is not Glory, and that Glory, according to Francois, is on the Stonewave Cliffs. Thus, SPA joins the expedition, becoming their primary form of traversal, and they all head to the Stonewave Cliffs to retrieve Glory for SPA. Back at camp, we see that Mael is having nightmares about many abstract situations, which includes flashing images of the man from the beach, Alicia, and a stranger burning in a house fire. As she wrestles with these dreams, visions, and the awful things she's witnessed on the continent, she receives wisdom and comfort from Gustav. The expedition then heads to the Stonewave Cliffs, where they eventually find SKA's rock, Glory, and survive an encounter with an incredibly powerful Nevron. Lune and Ciel jump down to SKA, who is in the water below the cliffs, but before Mael and Gustav can join them,
It's more about
Gustav fights to the last breath to protect Mael, but it's a fruitless endeavor. The white-haired man then approaches Mael and invokes a vision upon her where she is floating in the ether, and there she hears the bickering voices of a man and a woman. She returns to her body shortly afterwards, and the man goes to harm Mael, but before he can, he is stopped by a mysterious man with a sword. He tells Mael to go to her friends as he handles things with the white-haired man, and she does just that. Back at camp, everyone is mourning Gustav, most especially Mael. The mysterious man from the cliffs then arrives at camp, offering directions for the expeditioners, as well as returning Gustav's metal arm. Lune and Ciel interrogate him, and he
Which hero
reveals
do you think
he
you wanna
was
be
an
today?
expeditioner from the very first expedition, Expedition Zero. He explains that a few people from Expedition Zero stopped aging and were not demolished, which includes Expedition Zero's commander, Renoir, the white-haired man.
Now, who
Renoir
am I gonna
apparently
banish from
believes
this
this
match?
immortality is a gift from the Paintress and thus defends her, unlike this stranger, who is exhausted by being unable to die and thus seeks to take down the Paintress. He requests to join the expedition and reveals his name is Verso, bringing an end to Act 1. Act 1 is narratively quite good. It does a great job of revealing its hand one card at a time, and the player, much like the expeditioners, is taking the adventure one goal at a time, trying to make sense of the mysteries, the world, and its inhabitants, with the narrative driven forward by a sense of mystery and adventure. This reality is so grand, so other, and the plot around the Paintress and these mysterious immortal individuals and Mael's role in it all is such a fascinating mystery. It all comes together to create a driving force forward where I couldn't put the controller down.
You'll need a
And the
top-notch
twist
team
at
to win
the
this
end,
one.
I mean, jeez, you've got to have some serious balls to kill off the game's protagonist more than a third of the way through the story. It's one thing to pull a Game of Thrones where you do this at the end of a first season in a narrative with a half a dozen branching storylines, but to do it a third of the way through a single narrative and then replace them with a brand new character we know nothing about, like I said, you gotta have some balls for that. And
Round
even
one.
more shocking to me, it works. You see, Verso does three important things when he joins the expedition as the
30
central
seconds
character.
before you attack.
He
Get
unravels the
ready.
mystery just enough to create a new set of questions.
Hey, Hawkeye.
He shifts the structure of the narrative from unknown adventure into a real mission, and he creates a blank slate for the player to develop deeper relationships with the other characters. Through Verso, we learn more about the mysterious Renoir. We learn about his connection
battle
to the
starts in
Paintress,
5,
and we learn how
4,
to stop them
3,
both. But we
2,
still don't
1.
understand why they're
All you
immortal.
need to do
We
is
don't
capture
know
the
anything
mission
else
area.
about this
Got
new
it?
Verso character, and all of this is occurring with a shifting dynamic for the characters we are already attached to. Just enough is revealed to satisfy our curiosity, but just enough is left hidden that the curiosity remains, driving the plot ever forward. Verso also immediately begins giving the expedition new direction. His wealth of knowledge about the continent and years of experience provide a guide for not just the expedition but for the narrative, shifting the entire structure and focus of the story. With a clear path to follow, the momentum is no longer driven by author's history and rather conviction and clear goals. Considering how long the plot centered on wandering aimlessly, picking up the next target through lucky stumbles, I think this shift in perspective and dynamic is very well placed in the overall narrative structure. And finally, Verso provides the classic blank slate character. Going forward, Verso will be able to develop relationships with the characters starting from scratch. He himself having a backstory with very limited information provided and no previous interactions with each character, creating the opportunity for not just Verso, but the player to develop relationships with the members of the expedition by using Verso as a self-insert. Gustav's history with each member of the party was a limiting factor for the player to insert themselves into these interactions with the party members, and Verso provides that insert, allowing for deeper exploration of each individual character as well as relational development with them, not just for Verso, but for the player. Because of these factors, this switch from Gustav to Verso actually works. The narrative for it gets stale. It opens the door for these characters to change and grow as they wrestle with their grief, and provides the environment necessary for the player to advance in their relationship with the characters. It's so impressive, because on paper, killing a protagonist for a nobody a significant way through the plot is counterintuitive to almost any contemporary wisdom on narrative writing, and I don't think it would have worked in any other format. But in this type of video game, in this point, in this story, it is pure magic. With STA now able to swim, the expedition heads for the quarry to the north, taking them to the prevention of some Nebrons and expeditioners. Mael asks to bury Gustav's arm, and Verso tells her that he knows a place they can stop along the way. The expedition travels through the quarry until they encounter the Nebron responsible for a great deal of the death they've encountered throughout this part of the continent. Upon defeating the Nebron in a nightmarish cavern, which is literally filled with the blood of other expeditioners, they make their way to the place Verso had talked about, a beautiful red tree overlooking several buried expeditions. Here, they lay Gustav to rest with a heartfelt, funeral-esque scene for the character. It's very touching, and you really feel for these characters, especially Mael, as he mourns for her lost brother. Considering how connected I had personally gotten to Gustav, this moment felt as much of a player as it does for the character, and it's a worthy send-up for Gustav. After exiting the Forgotten Battlefield, the group rests camp where Verso tells them his plan. Head to Monoko's station to recruit Verso's oldest friend to the expedition, and then head to Old Lumiere to destroy something known as the Heart of the Paintress, which will dismantle the magical barrier which is protecting her monolith. Upon arriving at Monoko's station, they discover an abandoned train station buried within a snowy cavern, which contains a society of Grondis, large creatures covered in hair and stone. Inside of the station, they are ambushed by a jester with a staff, and Verso reveals that this is Monoko, who is already well acquainted with both STA and Noko. The expedition duel him to demonstrate his power, and then defeat a large Nebron outside of the station. Monoko collects the foot of the Nebron, demonstrating his ability to transform into Nebron by collecting the feet, and then joins the expedition on their journey to Old Lumiere. The expedition then heads to and arrives at Old Lumiere. The heart resides at the center of the city, and the team finds their path blocked by debris. Monoko solves the problem by aggressively destroying the debris in his Nebron form, causing everyone to be knocked out by the debris. I appreciate the realism in this scene. It may not be entirely consistent with other story beats, but there's a reason we as people have demolition experts. Debris is a real thing that can seriously harm people. It also introduces us to the brash nature of Monoko, providing a strong introduction to not just the benefits, but also the flaws of the character. Also, right afterwards, we see that he is Pride, talking about how he's so sincere that even when he messes up, you can't help but adore him, and also feel bad that he feels bad, despite the fact that he did indeed fuck up. As a result of all of this, the expedition is split up. Lune, CL, and Monoko head towards the center of town together, and along the way they discover a journal which reveals something about Verso that causes Lune and CL great concern, specifically for the safety of Mael, and Monoko comes to Verso's defense, but that doesn't prevent Lune and CL from charging towards the center of Old Lumiere. Meanwhile, Mael and Verso travel together to the center of town, but along the way Verso disappears, leaving Mael to reach the Paintress's heart on her own. When she reaches the center of Old Lumiere, similar to the one we previously found Mael in, and she pronounces that she recognizes
Behold the God of Thunder!
mysterious woman, similar to the curator who originally found Verso then suddenly spins past her. He had set traps and the woman would open the door for Mael, henceforth why he abandoned her. But in the middle of his charge, he stops, also in the manor, and walks out of the front door. And Alicia is there too. Verso and Renoir discuss family and Renoir's motivation, and as Mael approaches Renoir for a fight, Renoir reveals that Verso is Renoir's son. Renee, Minoko, and Ciel then arrive, revealing that this is the information they discovered from reading the journal. Now, here's the thing. I know people who were absolutely stunned that Verso was the son of Renoir, but if I'm being honest, that was something I assumed when they first interacted at the end of Act 1. In fact, I was so sure about this that I didn't realize that it was a twist in the plot. I honestly thought this information had been referred to somewhere along the way in dialogue, but apparently it hadn't been. I guess I just inferred it based on the way they talk to each other and the subtext of their dialogue. Thus, I found this reveal, compared to a lot of the other ones throughout the plot, to be somewhat underwhelming. It didn't change my perspective on Verso as a character or the plot, and it was neither shocking nor scandalous. This, to me, was the most underwhelming part of the plot. All the buildup of Verso as this mysterious figure hiding things for the most predictable outcome to be true. It left something to be desired. I'm not sure what other reveals you could have put here, but maybe there could have been a little more. Something to make our jaws really hit the floor, because there's still plenty to reveal here without giving away the plot, as we will come to learn. The expedition then fights Renoir. After an epic duel, Renoir performs a fatal blow, but Minoko takes the brunt of the blast, killing him, to the ultimate dismay of Minoko. Once again, this continues the underwhelming direction of this important encounter, as Noko is a character who is very much only present in the background, and culminating this scene in his sacrifice and having Minoko be the one most upset about it after setting the bar for death in this story with Gustave and the Morning of Mael just felt kind of hollow. It was almost a relief to me that it was Noko who took the shot and not someone I actually cared about, which demonstrates that something was missing here, either a building up of Noko or another member of the party taking the shot. Not that I would have preferred having one of the other characters die, and the death of Noko does set up a lot of Minoko's story, but I just think something was missing to make this part fit. Mael then attacks Renoir fruitlessly, and as Renoir goes to strike her in anger, something I missed my first time seeing this cutscene and only noticed after the fact, is that Verso calls Mael Alicia. Something that comes full circle later, but it's still a very quick, easily missable moment that has massive implications that only make sense when going over the narrative in retrospect. When the swords of Renoir and Verso lock, the scene once again turns into the black and white of Mael's vision. Here's a moment with Alicia before the entirety of the manor vanishes. The first time we witnessed such a moment of emotional outburst from the otherwise stoic character, making the failure of the expeditioners feel all the more weighty. Upon returning to camp, the expeditioners come to terms with Verso's heritage as Minoko mourns Noko. Verso expresses regret for missing their chance to destroy the Paintress's heart with no way to get the monolith now available. But Renee informs him that the journal she found states otherwise. It turns out that by acquiring 2 artifacts from the Axons, which are 3 massive and powerful creatures, the curator can forge a weapon which will destroy the barrier to the monolith. Despite protests from Verso, the expedition eventually decides this is the only path forward and thus departs to go face the Axons. One of them is not reachable, according to Verso, leaving the other 2 available for the expedition to fight. The game allows the player to decide which Axon to fight first. I chose my initial encounter to be with the Axon on the east side of the continent. This Axon, named Cyrene, resides in the center of a massive coliseum, which might honestly be my favorite environment in the entire game due to its masterful architecture. Cyrene is a massive dancing wooden doll who's capable of combat with her. Lume gets a moment to shine and overcome the Axon's charm and landing the final blow, allowing her to play the artifact, which they give to the curator. The curator demands that Mael give him the artifact, which she obliges. The next Axon is located in a stone canyon, and this one is named the Mask Keeper. In order to fight the Mask Keeper, the expedition must go to 3 areas. the Joyful Veil, the Anger Veil, and the Sadness Veil, and defeat 3 stone masks in combat in order to defeat the Axon found there. Following this, and after dealing the Axon, CL gets her moment to shine, defeating the Mask Keeper and collecting the second and final artifact. Upon returning to his curator and giving him both artifacts, he crafts a sword, which Mael thinks is actually equipped for combat, and it's not only one of the coolest looking weapons in the game, and my personal favorite weapon aesthetically, but it is also very powerful. The expedition takes the sword to the barrier guarding the monolith, and Mael and Phoenix use it and shatter the barrier, granting them access to the monolith where the Paintress resides. The expedition finally approaches the Mask 33, which has overlooked and haunted the expedition for so long, and they begin fighting the entity they believe to be the Paintress. But their attacks do nothing to her. The faceless woman then appears as everyone's face begins to burn except for Verso. This, however, was only an illusion, and the burning eventually ceases as the faceless woman disappears, leaving behind a portal which the expedition follows her through. Honestly, this scene did not make a lot of sense to me. Like, I kind of get why it happened. It's poetic of the burnt face of Alicia, but I just don't really get why the faceless woman is doing it. Maybe a warning? I don't know. It was a bizarre and abstract sequence that felt somewhat forced to me in order to get the characters access to the interior of the monolith. And the portal does in fact take them inside the monolith, where the expedition climbs to the top by going through a miniature version of every major location on the continent they've already explored. I love this sequence to the top because it gives such a strong sense of continuity to the eventual encounter with the Paintress, taking a step back through every gorgeous environment we've encountered up to this point, looking back on the journey we've had to get here. It's a really nice thing, creating a sense of nostalgia and mourning for the journey we are leaving behind as we're going to save the world. It's a stroke of genius, and it might be my favorite part of the game apart from the final encounter with the Paintress. Once near the top, the expedition encounters a room with a black hole at the center and a large crevice in the wall across from them. As they approach the crevice, they encounter an image of a man and a woman holding one another before Renoir approaches them once again. Renoir tries to convince Verso to turn away from his goal of taking down the Paintress, but Verso rejects, leading to a final confrontation with Renoir. Upon defeating him, Renoir attempts one last outpouring of power, but is stopped and approached by the Curator, who uses his own power along with Renoir to unleash Renoir, ending his threat for time. I'll be honest, I found this final confrontation with Renoir to be overwhelming. It just felt kind of empty, as if there should have been a commander send-off, but I suppose there's something poetic about him suffering the same fate as the people who condemned Gamon by fighting off their expeditioners. The expedition then enters the fantastic monolith. There they encounter the Paintress, who is in fact the faceless woman. The Paintress speaks to Mael, wondering if, quote, he is playing tricks. It turns out Alicia and Mael have the same face, and Alicia is the Paintress's mother. Verso tells the Paintress she needs to go home, which sends her spiraling into an absolute rage, and Verso explains to her that Verso is dead. Look, there's a lot of revealing dialogue here. I don't need to get into all of it, but it does lead to the boss fight with the Us against the world! Now, I really like going back over all this revealing dialogue because it demonstrates how tight-knit the writing was in being consistent with the overall story, since it all makes sense now that I know the grand mystery, yet the first time I played through it, I had no clue what the hell was going on, which is, I'm sure, exactly what the writers were going for. Dialogue which is realistic and sensible within the context, and a complete mystery without. And without a doubt, I can say, mission accomplished from where I'm standing. And holy sh**, this boss fight is maybe the most epic boss fight I have ever witnessed in a video game. I don't need to say much. Look at the damn screen. The entirety of this boss fight is a stunning masterpiece of art and animation, of passion and concept brought to life. This is the best part of the entire game, where everything comes to a head not just narratively, but artistically. The music, the aesthetic, everything is perfect here. This was one of the most epic sequences I've ever participated in any game, ever, period. My gosh, it is so damn good. Upon defeating the Paintress, she gamages in what was the only scene in the entire game for me to have a significant frame drop. The large 33, which has been such a staple of the game's imagery, is finally erased from the monolith, and with that, the expedition has done it. They are victorious. This moment somehow feels both tragic and beautiful, joyous yet somehow sad. The facial expressions, the voice acting, the music, it all creates this bizarre sense of contradiction. Knowing what comes next and all the context after the fact, it really is quite a brilliant scene in its atmosphere. There's not finality here. There is more to be revealed, and you can tell through all of the scene's subtleties that something here isn't quite final. It isn't quite right. Mael plants the flag of Expedition 33, symbolizing their victory, as Verso continues to express remorse and questioning. The expedition rides Esquier back to Lumiere, where the ultimate victory of the expedition is celebrated. There's dancing and joy as Verso sits at the dock, reading a letter which was given to him by Alicia earlier in the story before the final confrontation. In it, Alicia states that the letter is for Mael, and it's up to Verso whether or not to give it to her. In it, Alicia references that Mael is in fact her, Alicia, and that the Alicia who is writing the letter was created by the Paintress. In fact, the entire family we have encountered is the family of the Paintress, painted by her to reflect her family in a different world. By eliminating the Paintress, Mael and the expedition have unleashed a force which plans to erase everything. That force being Mael's real father. The gamage was a result of the Paintress's power slowly fading in the wake of her husband's attempts to erase everything, and her trying to save whoever she could for as long as she could. Alicia tells Mael to consider finding a way to save everything, and Verso then decides to drop the letter into the harbor, having never given it to Mael. The scene fades to complete silence as a blast across the ocean is unleashed. As it sweeps across Lumiere, it plunges the city into darkness, as quite literally, everyone is gamaged, bringing an end to Act 2. Since we just summarized it, I'll start by talking about the ending of this act. First off, I thought the letter from Alicia was a little vague in what it was describing, and because of that, in the moment, I didn't quite get what it was getting at. It was a moment that I think required some clearer writing, although some people may simply describe it as a skill issue on my part. Either way, I didn't fully grasp what was being said by Alicia and Mael at the time, and it took some serious contemplation to figure out what had happened, and even a little research after I actually beat the game and understood the extent of the plot. Either way, the ending of Act 2 absolutely blew my mind. You get this sense that Verso had been hiding something from the moment he conversed with Renoir in